My wife and I enjoy the outdoors. Well, to say that we like the outdoors is an understatement. Our goal in life is to be able to retire early and travel, hiking, camping, seeing the world, especially the beauty that is the natural world. Going to places like New York City seems interesting, but it's always been the energy of what was created without the helping hands of man that really calls to us. But sometimes the energy we absorb isn't always positive. Sometimes it's benevolent. Sometimes that energy should scare us so badly that we never want to step foot into another wooded area. And one time, after a hike into the Smoky Mountains, we actually considered it. It was a long 3 months since our last camping adventure. Jennifer and I don't like going more than a couple of months without going on an adventure into nature of some kind, whether that be just going on a day hike or taking a long weekend to just get away from people and get grounded again. Leaving the troubles of the materialistic world behind, the stresses of paying bills and making sure kids are all taken care of. Kids. That's laughable. They're all grown up, and we're just worriers when it comes to them. However, the time was past due for us to leave it all behind for a few days. So, I surprised Jennifer with a trip to the Great Smoky Mountains, a cabin which sat propped up on the side of a mountain. There were other cabins around, not too close, but they were visible. However, this was early spring and tourists weren't filling those temporary homes in droves as they would in the following weeks. It was just us in this abandoned community surrounded by mountains and a never-ending forest below. When we take these little breaks, I enjoy having some relaxation in a hot tub or just reading a book in the cool mountain air on a deck or in front of a large window overlooking the budding trees of the mountain slope below. It's breathtaking, yet wild. While my life is full of stuff to do, that I just want to enjoy this and slow down time. From the very large rear window of the cabin, which led out to the deck overlooking the mountainous region below, it seemed like I could see the edge of the earth, and there is no one around but us. I was the king of the world, and beside me, my beautiful queen, smiling. She knew my thoughts well. Jennifer, on the other hand, likes taking time for us to go on nature hikes and taking photos of the flora and fauna that grows so beautifully in the most random spots. I gladly accompany her on these missions of solitude and tranquility whenever the urge hits her. Keeping my wife smiling is my number one goal in life. Besides that, I rather enjoy this alone time in the wilderness with her. We arrived at the cabin early morning. The off-season had accommodated us favorably as check-in time was usually around 3 p.m., but I knew Jennifer wanted to head out right away for a hike, and I was happy to accompany her. After all, this getaway was as much for her as it was for me. As we prepared to leave the cabin after barely getting settled in, we took note that the place was a bit odd. Not scary, just confusing. There were things left in the drawer that were definitely not meant for us. Personal belongings from past guests, a watch, a pair of socks, a half-used water bottle on the night table. How rude of the owners not to pick this up before we arrived. We put the items into a bag and set it by the front door as we began to head out to the trailhead leading up Mount LeConte, the tallest peak in the Smoky Mountains. It took us about 30 minutes to reach the trailhead by car. We parked on the main road about 100 meters from the trail mouth. It was a beautiful day, around 60 degrees at the base of the mountains, and there was a slight cool breeze that promised not to let us overheat as we began the long hike to a spot Jennifer had picked out. This time of the year, the hiking trails were pristine, not trampled by partying teens or kids being dragged along for an adventure against their wills by their parents. Even though it was 60 degrees in the valley below, there was still snow on these trails at the higher elevations. Just hints of it, nothing crazy, but enough to make one lose their footing if they weren't paying enough attention. When we set off on these adventures, we often push the limits, not just with the difficulty of the hikes, but also with the time involved. We will often start early morning with full backpacks of food and water, and end the hike right up into the early evening, just after dusk when the trailheads are going to close. If you have ever been in the woods, you know it gets dark in the woods long before the darkness sets in around an open area. And being early spring, it was getting dark still rather early. As we hiked up Mount LeConte, there was nothing out of the ordinary. We took our time with the steep inclines and sped up just a bit in the flatter stretches of trail. Aside from the line of stacked rocks along the path from humans trying to leave their mark on an otherwise undisturbed preserve, nothing seemed out of character. Well, almost nothing. At least not yet. There was still plenty of daylight left, and Jennifer and I were near our goal on the mountain trail, an overlooked clearing that showed the entire world beneath our feet. I know this all sounds cliche and nothing that no one else has experienced in this neck of the world. At least to Jennifer, it seemed that way. Me? I'm a protector. I perceive danger around every corner. I keep a sharp eye on the brush. It only takes one time to startle a black bear mother tending to her young, and we will cease to exist. I keep all my senses about me as much as I can, enjoying my wife in the quiet walk so I can listen and look for anything. Well, surprising. This is black bear country, and early spring is an especially dangerous time to run into one of these majestic beasts. But I didn't yet understand that black bears would be the least of my worries. But my senses finally noticed. It was quiet, unusually quiet. This is generally the time of year when you'd hear a squirrel beginning its gathering of food for the next hibernation season, or birds singing to attract a mate to nest with. But I realized there was none of that. There were no sounds at all. Not even the wind stirred the tree limbs with budding leaves. As we sat on a large rock on the overlook, I stared intently in every direction, moving my head slowly as not to attract Jennifer's attention to the point she believes I'm being paranoid again. Concentrating on my surroundings with an unnerving feeling, listening for any sign of life, a rustle in the drying leaves that lined the ground, the snap of a branch. Anything, but there was nothing. Whenever I get these feelings or notice something amiss, I don't tell Jennifer. I don't know if it's a way of keeping her calm or keeping her from thinking I'm crazy. She doesn't believe in some of the stuff that I've seen, and she has this innocent charm about her vision of the world. Everything is safe to her. Well, everything she has done before is safe. For me, when I relax and start to feel safe, I feel the most exposed. Vulnerable, at my weakest. Right now, I'm at my strongest mentally. I'm aware something is off. It's an unsettling feeling, a feeling that tells me we have to leave right now. How do I get Jennifer to break away from her serenity without looking crazy, though? She's so peaceful, sitting snuggled up on my arm. This is her paradise, and I can't just rip her away from it. With every passing moment, the feeling to get up and run intensifies. In psychology classes, we talked about extensively how the human instinct is of flight or fight, and nothing was telling me to fight at all. It was screaming to me to grab her hand and run. The longer I waited, the more I felt we were in real danger. There seemed to be even less life in the woods, becoming more and more dead with every ticking second. A dark feeling, dread, sadness, then death. I felt death, like being slowly encapsulated by blackness. Then I saw it further up the trail, staring down at us. Blackness. If I had to visualize what I was feeling, it was this. It had no features, only a blurred silhouette, at least 9 feet tall, arms like a man, on 2 legs upright, not making a sound or a movement, just staring, studying me. With the sun still high enough to give plenty of light, there should have been some feature visible. There was nothing, no glowing red eyes, no face at all. The energy it exuded brought a tear to my eye. I had to act now. I had to get us out of there now. I broke the silence, keeping one eye on this unmoving figure. "Honey, I'd like to start heading back now." She looked at me with a face that was mixed with confusion and annoyance. I mean, this is her place, her love. But was she not sensing what was going on around us? Did she not at least notice the lack of wildlife? If she did, she didn't say anything. This thing was to her right, just 50 feet away. She broke the silence with her own terms. Just a few more minutes. How do I say no to that? Knowing damn well I need to. Normally I would say yes, but this time I had to press. If we wait, it will be too late. I mean, it'll get dark before we get halfway down the trail. We need to be safe. We didn't bring good flashlights. She looked less annoyed by this, not knowing the darkness I was talking about wasn't the sun setting at all. I could navigate our way down this mountain in the dark on a normal day. Just stay close to the left where the mountain slopes upward. I knew this trail, but my pleas seemed to convince her enough to get her to move, slowly. Still, she was annoyed with me. That I could live with and work out later. My focus at that moment was to get her out of there without freaking her out, and so far I was doing a pretty good job. Walking down this kind of incline always brought on a faster pace. Gravity, you know. I struggled to keep Jennifer in front of me. Whatever this thing was, it was approaching us from behind. That settled it. This thing had made us its target, following us down the trail but slowly gaining on us. Dread, fear, darkness. My heart rate was up from our movements down the mountain, but I felt cold, not like being touched with a flake of snow, but chilled to the bone. It made me shiver as I walked. Ahead of me in the fading light, I watched Jennifer as she tried to slow her pace. All the while, I was trying to speed us up. Then the toe of my hiking shoe nicked the heel of her own. She began speaking as she turned around to face me, annoyance really coming through in her tone. Her annoyance ended abruptly.
"Hey, slow down and walk on your own feet."
As her eyes made contact with something behind me, I've never seen this look on her face. Fear. She grabbed my hand tightly. I didn't have to look. I tore her gaze from the darkness I knew she was staring straight into and calmly motioned down the trail. Run. Her face said everything as she nodded her head. She understood why I was in a hurry to leave. She knew I had already seen it. My face said it all. I'm sure she was confused by how quietly I told her to run, even though I was more afraid than I have ever been in my life. It generally isn't a good idea to look back when you're running away from something. You can lose your balance and your body tends to follow your eyes. We were running, while being careful not to trip on any of the roots or stones that protruded through the trail floor. Not to mention, if we hit a patch of slick ice or snow, it could end our escape with a tumble down a 200-foot drop, or make us stumble enough to get caught by whatever this thing was. But I had to look back. Was our pace fast enough? The fading light was making it more dangerous to speed up. I looked back. It was still slowly gaining on us, maybe 30 feet behind us now, and it wasn't alone. Two more of these entities had joined the chase. That's when the one in the lead let out a sound. Mouthless. It sounded like what I imagined hell sounding like. That's when I stumbled. Jennifer, still gripping my hand tightly, was somehow able to continue running while steadying me on my feet by my hand, pulling me up and away from the drop-off to our right. I could feel her pulse in my own hand. The scream seemed to have stirred something. The air went from being still to a wind that whipped through the trees with such force that I could see the treetops to the right bending, branches banging together to the point of snapping around us. The sun dropped further behind the mountains. It wasn't completely set, but the interior of this forest became dark. Darker than I'd ever seen. The same darkness I could feel oppressing me at the clearing overlook above. The scream bellowed out once more. The winds twisted through the trees harder. I don't know where we got that energy, but we increased our speed, running faster than I have ever ran. And there it was, the trailhead. I felt breath on my neck as I used her stiff arm to push Jennifer ahead of me. If this thing was going to catch us, it would only catch me. As we reached the trailhead, everything stopped. The wind, The screams, the dread, fear, all of it gone. Jennifer must have noticed it as well. As we exited the trail, we both collapsed to our knees. Adrenaline had carried us this far, but now was abandoning us. Heaving, gasping for air, my shaky arms kept my torso from completely plummeting to the ground. I turned my head to face the trail just out of reach. I watched as two of the entities disappeared into the tree-laden hillside. The last was unmoving, standing in the same pose it had been when I first saw it. The dim sun was behind it, outlining its blurry silhouette. I could feel it tempting me, no, taunting me to come back. Keeping an eye on it, I crawled over to Jennifer, took my last sip of water from my backpack. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the bottle to Jennifer's dry lips. It took us about 10 minutes to gain enough strength to walk the 100 meters to the car. The whole time, it was watching me. We didn't speak. There was still a sense that we needed to conserve energy in case we had to make another run for it. I unlocked the doors. Before we got in, we could hear life return around us. A light breeze, the nighttime creatures stirring. I got in the driver's seat, Jennifer in the passenger seat, and I drove 30 minutes to our cabin. Our sanctuary, our haven. We didn't speak in the car, not out of anger, but what could we say? We were exhausted and just wanted to get back, go to sleep, and hope we were having some kind of shared nightmare. I wondered what would have become of us had I waited an extra couple of minutes to get Jennifer to leave the mountain clearing. I let the thought flitter away. As we prepared for bed, we heard it again. The scream. It was further away this time, down the mountain from our cabin. The wind thrashed through the trees with such ferocity that the foundation and windows of our cabin shook. It felt like the cabin was going to fall down the side of the mountain. The view that was, at first, serene, now instilled a sense of destruction. It took Jennifer and I about 2 minutes to gather what belongings we could carry, get in the car, and peel off down the mountain and out of the woods, leaving whatever we couldn't carry in the cabin, making it a permanent fixture for the next guest to rummage through. We vowed never to return to that neck of Tennessee. But did we keep that promise?